If you don't have an AI strategy, your organisation is dead in the water. Now, my job today is to effectively wrap up the day. So some of the things that I will talk about, you will already have heard, but I'm trying to pick out the key themes of across the whole day and turn that into a reasonably coherent talk. So as Andrew kindly said, I work for Altus Consulting, so we help a number of people in the room and others going through business transformation. And obviously AI is now a key part of that. And on the way out, you will be thrust a white paper in your hand, which again captures a lot of the thinking that you will have heard from the very first presentation this morning, so Daniel, and at various other points during the day. And this chap has come up at least twice today, so Gary Kasparov. So I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. What I'm going to tell you is that he said, "No computer will ever beat me." And 12 years later, it did. So when you've got the very best people at the very top of their game saying that and being proven wrong, that's a good indication for how we should think about our industry, I would argue. What I want to do is just take us back a second and just actually say, what is artificial intelligence? I don't actually think we've answered that question today. We've talked a lot about what it can do. We haven't actually said what it is. And I talk to a lot of people, and everybody today says that they've got an AI proposition as part of their development. Every single company, pretty much. They'll say, yeah, we're developing AI, yeah, we've got it, we're doing it. Are they really, or is it just the latest buzzword? Is it the latest hype? So this guy, you might better know him, so that's this Alan Turing. He was part of the team that broke the Enigma code in the Second World War. Perhaps his second claim to fame is that he's actually the founder of computer science, which underpins artificial intelligence. And he talks about AI as being a science. And it's where computers can effectively do things that typically require human intelligence. So that is the very basis of what we've been talking about throughout today. When we look at AI is this massive, massive subject which kicked off back in the 1950s. But really the bit that we should be interested in, the bit that will actually make a difference, is a subtopic of that. And again, it's come up a little bit today, which is machine learning. The key word there is learning. It's something where a computer can teach itself to do things without being pre-programmed. That's the key. And then there's another subtopic of that, which I think Pete talked about, neural networks and like, and that's when we go down into deep learning. So this is the very clever stuff, but this is where the algorithm is mimicking the human brain. So so when we talk about AI, those are the sort of the three levels that we should be thinking about. The two that I'm particularly interested in are the two subtopics. Now, we all watch the sci-fi movies, and this is typically where AI goes, isn't it? It's about robots taking over the world, killing all the humans, and then there's a little gang of them who try and rescue the human race, and we're all okay again. But that's not reality, is it? It's certainly not reality quite today. I would argue that AI today is actually more like one of those, in that it is very, very good at doing something very, very narrow. That is, in many cases, what AI is today. You put your crockery in one of those, it doesn't know it's crockery, you end up with lots of bits of china. There is so much hype. And I think what we've seen today is that a pre-programmed decision tree is not AI. There is no intelligence in a decision tree. Somebody has just drawn a decision tree and you just follow it down. There's not a great deal of intelligence in that. So if people say that their AI solution is based around that, I would suggest that you argue strongly the other way. But to be fair, we are seeing now some degree of machine learning, and the guys from Wealth Wizards and others are obviously beginning to demonstrate some of that. So is what we're seeing right now today in financial services disruptive? I'd argue no, it's not. I think we're just beginning on the pivot of that. But we've heard about AlphaGo. Now, I thought this was going to be the one example that I was actually going to have to my own, and then somebody in the audience asked a question and Daniel used it as his answer. Little bugger, but never mind. Anyway, so AlphaGo is effectively the capability that Google DeepMind created over the last few years. And this is about trying to outsmart the humans. And as he mentioned, what it did a couple of years ago was that it beat the Grandmaster. So this is a game that has been in development, or was created over 2,000 years ago. And this computer beat the Grandmaster. And within this game, there are millions of moves. So it is far, far more complex than chess. It's far more complex than the IBM when that beat Kasparov. Just last year, it beat the world number one. Okay, so that's all very interesting. So what are the takeouts of that? Well, it taught itself to play this game in about 4 hours. So that's sort of key takeout number one. So this machine played against multiple versions of itself until it knew how to play the game. The key was that, and we heard it this morning about the move down the fifth row and all of that, it found a unique way of playing the game. So although humans have been playing the game for 2,500 years, this computer in 4 hours found a better way and it beat the champions. That's the key takeout. Now, DeepMind are already active in the health sector. And if you read the FT over the weekend, you'll have seen that there was an article which talked about AI being used to predict people having dementia, but 10 years before it becomes, people are aware of it. So that's the power that we see in other sectors. So I'd then ask the question, well, what happens if they applied that same level of thinking and insight into our sector? What would that mean to you and me? So could they find a better way to do accountancy, to be a tax expert, or indeed give financial advice? So if we look from sort of now going forwards, and I think Peter's touched on some of this, what we'll see obviously is far more of the learning. So that AI at that high level, decision trees, that's yesteryear. This will all be about computers and machines teaching themselves how to do things better than we can. And again, we've seen the example, the automated cars. Now, the interesting thing about the automated cars, I guess, is that they don't always get it right. And there have been some very well publicised issues where people have unfortunately been killed in those examples. That's not to say that this is a bad thing, it needs to stop. It's the continued development of these practices. Now, a couple of the speakers have said that they don't like giving predictions, so I will. So why not? But they're not going to be my predictions. So what you're going to see coming around this circle in a moment is some research that Oxford University and Yale University conducted in the last sort of 12, 18 months or so. And these are various fields where they believe that AI, machine learning, will effectively outsmart humans by particular dates. So effectively, in the next sort of 25 to 35 years, a whole range of very, very complex tasks and fields, people from Oxford, people from Yale believe they will be able to outsmart humans. So I would argue that people in this room should be thinking, so what might that mean for me? And that gets a little bit more scary, doesn't it? Because there's other predictions of people from universities who are saying, actually, it could be brought forward much, much quicker. So outsmarting all of us literally in the next 22 years. That's probably within most people's or many people's working lifetime. Certainly when I think of my daughter, she's 20, this will impact her without a doubt. So what is she going to do for her career? And we sort of touched on that a little bit earlier. So this is increasingly disruptive, and I think we heard earlier about this fourth industrial revolution. And that's where we've got sort of the digital, the physical, AI all coming together and melding into one. And there's a phrase that's called the singularity, which is where machines get to the point where they are superior to humans. And that is believed to be within this century. So again, that just makes us think maybe a little bit harder about what we're up to. So my question to everybody in the room, and again we've touched on it, and I think there's potentially two answers to this, is what do I need to do to become unclonable? And when I say unclonable, what I mean is what skills or knowledge do I have to have that a computer can't replicate? Because as we've heard, if it's anything to do with data analysis and data crunching and all that sort of stuff, a computer is far, far superior than anybody in this room ever will be. So what are those skills that we have to have that will make us different, which means that we're not replaceable by one of those computers? And so when I think of our education system, it actually makes me weep a little bit, because we insist on pumping our kids and students with knowledge. All knowledge, I just have to get my phone out, tap in a question to Google, and I've got the answer. So that is not the way that we should be teaching our kids, I would argue. We've got to try and help them become more innovative, more creative, all the things that, as we've heard earlier, are far, far more difficult for a computer at the moment to do. We've also heard about a number of the AI challenges today. And I'll pick out just maybe a few of these. And Elon Musk came up early, didn't he? And Stephen Hawkins about AI safety. So we've already talked about the threat to potentially to jobs and livelihoods and so on. And that sort of went through into a question about universal basic income. So that's one potential sort of outcome. Anybody who works in a bank here, and I can see a few people here, probably spending more money on cybercrime and security and protecting and not letting these nasty things get into your computer systems, probably spending more money on that than probably anything else, and compliance. We've got the moral and ethical considerations. Again, that's a really interesting one. If we go back to the car analogy, so we've got this automated car going down the road, there's going to be an accident. Does it kill the one doctor who's walking down that side of the road, or does it plough into the group of school kids? And it's got to make that decision. So the one doctor can save hundreds, thousands of lives, or do you stop going into a group of kids who have got their whole futures ahead of them and will obviously get married, have babies, whatever it happens to be. So that is a moral decision that computer would have to take. How does it answer that? We've also got bias. So we've talked about structured and unstructured data today. So the machine learns from data. But what if the data that it's basing its thinking on is inherently biased before we've even started. Now, if we take our wealth industry as a good example of that, in fact, we've got quite a diverse group here today, which is very good, so well done to the Wealth Wizards team for that. But if we think about the wealth industry generally and investors, they will typically be people who look a little bit, sadly, like me. So they will be middle-ish class, they will be probably in a professional job, and they will be white, and they'll probably be a bit bald. And that is what they will be. And so if all the data is based on people that look a little bit like me, and in fact a few people I won't actually point out, but in this room, that's the data that it's working on. So how is it going to create the right answers for the people that haven't invested previously, those cohorts, the underinvested, the undersaved? That's a really key question, because we've got to train the data in the right ways. There is a massive lack of industry skill and knowledge in this space. So the Wealth Wizards team have obviously cornered the market in Leamington Spa and the Stratford and Birmingham area, so well done to you guys. But if we look globally, you've basically got the likes of Google and Facebook and Amazon and those guys. And in China, Tencent, Alibaba and so on, they are hoovering up the knowledge globally. And they are going around all the universities, and they are now raiding academia because they've already got everybody who were in these roles commercially. So we're going to have basically a shortage. And if you look at some of the salaries that they're paying for people literally just coming out of university, it would make your eyes water. People almost can write an unlimited check. So if you haven't got or if our kids haven't got the imagination or the skill sets to go and do sort of the storytelling and the creativity, then I think somebody said earlier, get them to become a data scientist, because they will earn a fortune. Another challenge, lots of hype. So we've already sort of touched on that, so I won't cover that one any further. But the bottom one actually applies to the businesses perhaps that you work for. So because AI is an important subject, or it gets lots of PR and press, every company then thinks it needs to have a PR message about it, because they've got to be seen to be doing something. So the question is, are you just being seen to be doing something, or have you actually got a team that's working out how to use this capability to actually transform your business? Or are you just after the PR message? Very different. Hopefully you found that all very interesting, but there is a but. And I'd argue the but is the so what. What does that mean to our industry and to you as an audience? And I love the quote that I'm about to say, and I think it's very relevant to a number of the things that have been said today. And this quote is split into two parts. The first is that logic will get you from A to B. And when I think about our industry, that applies exactly. So we always create processes that are logical, and they get us from there to there. And what we've done probably over the last 5, 7, 8 years is trying to get from there to there a bit quicker and a bit more efficient. And that's whole robo-advice stuff, isn't it? So we try and build in more efficiency, but we've taken a face-to-face proposition and we're trying to digitize it. And I'd argue that perhaps that is not necessarily the right approach or the best approach. So the second part of the quote that I love is that imagination will take you everywhere. And it's who in your organisation has actually got the imagination to not just think of the logic, but actually think of how you could reassess the value chain, rethink these things. Now we've heard a few examples today. So JP Morgan came up, so they replaced a whole load of commercial lawyers in their commercial departments, replaced that with an AI-based system. We've got some GI examples, we've got some chatbot examples and so on. and we've already seen the latest Google developer sort of chatbot there. Obviously, RegTech as well, and again, I think a few of the talks have touched on that. But these propositions are live, so these are happening. So these aren't just in development. This is where some of the, I guess you class the leading players are now at. We've got, don't know if Neil's still here, but we've got BlackRock on there. So they've actually placed some of their portfolio managers and stock pickers with robots. That's what they're doing. Now, interestingly, from a regulatory perspective, in the UK, we often give our regulator a bit of a kicking, and we get very frustrated with our regulator. But if you're in a different territory, a different country, often they will look at the UK as an exemplar. And I think this is a tremendous initiative, certainly in the AI space, in that they are now trying to make the, as it says there, the handbooks machine readable, so that all these RegTech providers will be able to analyse what's going on and create, I guess, a better service to the industry as a result of that. That said, I like that little picture down there. This is only we're sort of on the way to, as opposed to we're fully there. So whilst machines are very good, it says that the Dalek still can't walk up the stairs, so it still needs to have the human to hold its hand in the places where the machines can't do the reading. And I couldn't do a presentation really, especially after Andrew's very kind introduction, without a mention of robo-advisors, could I? That would be very foolish of me. So if I think of where that whole sort of sector came from and what it tried to do, it was all about trying to automate the investment decision process. So it's the investment algorithm. It's managing the portfolio of somebody. So that was really where it started. If you look at the States, that's still pretty much where it's at. If you look at a number of the propositions in the UK, that's what it's at. So that is a not unusual scenario. So digital robo-advice is all about the investment. What we've seen in a few pockets is that some organisations have taken that to the next level, and they're automating the financial advice process. Very, very different from just doing the algorithms to drive out the investment advice. But they still come under the same heading of robo-advisor, but a very, very important difference. And what we're now seeing is what I would call regulatory surety, and I think Andrew picked up on it earlier, which is about making sure that the house view within an advisory firm is consistent, it's being followed through, and if you've got outliers, they're being identified. So it's fantastic from a compliance perspective, absolutely fantastic, and an audit perspective. So this is how sort of some of the digital propositions will evolve, and we'll see in a moment how this takes us to a further level in a moment. If we look over in the States, and also there's a few examples now coming out in the UK, these are digital advice propositions which are trying to take the thinking again to another level. This particular example created a proposition that is built to provide anybody with fiduciary advice. This is a robo-advisor driven by AI to give fiduciary advice. And that is everything from the initial planning, debt management, saving and investing. So fiduciary is acting in their best interests. So what does that mean? So what these companies are trying to do is they're using chat. So let's bring in the chat technology to actually have a conversation online with a customer to identify the life events and goals. It'll create a financial plan. It'll work out whether it's affordable to the customer. be able to understand what their goals are, look at debt, and decide whether they should invest or not. Now, this is all algorithm driven. This isn't a human being involved in this. So this is a computer machine that is doing this whole process. It's for every single customer, it's looking at between 2 and 5 million data points, both personal and market data. It's analysing what's going on in your bank account. It's analysing your spending behaviour, your income. And then it's creating a financial plan, and it's running it 24/7. So when I look at that, and then I look at some of the digital propositions which we've got in the UK, these are miles apart, miles apart. Now, I suppose the interesting point is that this is still, this is a purely digital proposition, but they have also recognised the need for human, and we'll touch on that in a moment. Now, typically, I would ordinarily look at the US when you're looking at sort of digital robo propositions, but I also like looking to see what's going on in China. Because in China, they have very, very different regulatory environment to us, so their development tends to be much, much quicker and much more advanced in many, many cases. And whilst the US might have the most and the best data scientists, China is undoubtedly leading the way when it comes to the fusion of AI and fintech. And I'll give, I guess, a few examples. Some of these I'm sure you will have heard of before. So we've got Ant Financial Services. So this is owned by Alibaba. They have 450 million customers. So that's not bad, is it? And this is their insurance and wealth and savings sort of ecosystem. They offer a whole load of financial services. And I think it's probably becoming increasingly popular because it sometimes gets quoted at events. But they run a pretty large money fund. In fact, they run the largest money fund on the planet. But if you ask most people who runs that fund, they wouldn't know that it's a company in China called Ant. They just wouldn't know that. Yet they are taking money. So if you've got any global businesses in the room, they're taking effectively your customers, your money. So that's one example. And they in their sort of mission statement have said that they want to use AI amongst a whole load of other technology capabilities that will drive their business going forwards. So they are absolutely committed to AI as part of their proposition. And then WeChat, and I often use this example because I just think it's just a great example of some of the things that we see in the UK, but this is on a massive scale. So WeChat started life as a message service. So if any of you use Facebook and Messenger on your smartphones, then that's effectively what that is. Yeah, so it's a little messenger service that you can send a text or a picture to your friends. Now what they recognised is that if you just do it as a message service, there's not a huge value in that. If you create a platform, that opens up a whole new world of opportunity. And again, if you look at what Facebook and Messenger have done, you'll remember a few years ago, the Messenger app was taken out of Facebook and now it's its own little platform in its own right. And certainly in the States, you can now do a few more things because of that. But in China, they've taken it to one step further. And what you'll see come up in a moment are just some of the actions and transactions that you can do using the WeChat app. And this is by no means everything. This is just a few things to fill a slide up. There's a whole load more. So you can do all of those through an app on your phone. All of those through that one little app. They've also integrated a bank, albeit a fairly simple bank, but a bank nonetheless. And In a couple of clicks, you can also invest in a wealth fund. If you live in China today, you can live your whole life in that one single app. Now these are all partners, so this is a sort of a marketplace of partners. So I suppose the challenge, if you're in China, is if you're not part of that ecosystem, where are you? Are you out the game? Or how are you going to get your product to market? Because basically this becomes the new distribution model. So often, again, at conferences, you'll have heard about platform being the new model, and we hear about Facebook not creating any content, or Uber not having all these self-employed people, or Airbnb doesn't actually own the hotels. Well, this is a not dissimilar concept. So this is the platform. The partners are on the platform, and Tencent, who own WeChat, they basically become the hub. And so the question is for anybody who's a provider is, do you want to be the hub where people go, or do you want to be a spoke, so you're at the end of it, or are you going to be something else? That's the question. Now last year, China, as in the state, stated that it had the ambition to be the leader in AI by 2030. So that's its ambition. I must admit, having researched this market in a little bit of detail, I've got absolutely no doubt that they will achieve that. And we'll come back to what that means at the end. So that's 12 years away. So back to the UK. So we've heard about open banking and some of these other things. So the key for me is not that we focus on AI, or not that we focus on big data or IoT or any other little buzzword that happens to be going around. It's, so what do they really mean, and how do we join all those really, really clever things together into a coherent service and proposition? Because that's what organisations are now beginning to do. And some of you will have seen, the good stuff that HSBC have just done for their business customers about using visualisation to recognise people. And we've got other people doing biometric stuff. We've got obviously lots of API work and so on. So it's joining all the different bits up into that coherent proposition. So if I go back to that Albert Einstein quote about imagination or reimagination, that for me is how this comes together. So to reimagine financial services is not focusing just on one or something else. It's about joining the piece together. So that said, so that's all the digital stuff. But we ran some research, consumer research, back end of last year, and across the age groups, 80% of people still like dealing with a human. So where I think this gets to, certainly in advisory terms, is the augmented financial advisor. So this is the financial advisor who is using technology to support the business. So this isn't, and I think Andrew used the word man versus machine. And often we'll see the headlines, whether it's sort of digital versus or robo versus advisor and all that. That's purely for headline grabbing. The winning proposition certainly today is where you get the machine to do the hard crunchy number bit and the data gathering bit, the hard facts bit, and the people undoubtedly do the softer, the more emotive, the goal setting, the understanding the ambitions, the dreams, the fears of individuals. And if you combine those two things together, you end up with a far more efficient proposition, but still wrapped around with the human touch. I feel like I should burst into song, actually. I won't, but I feel I should. And so, I guess as we sort of close out and to wrap this up, there's a couple of, I guess, just good things that other people have said. And the first is that we tend to overestimate the amount of change that will happen in the next 2 years. And this goes back to the hype point. So we all get carried away with the latest buzzword, the latest hype, and everybody jumps on the bandwagon. And then invariably we all get disappointed when it doesn't quite deliver. But that said, I think what we also find is that we typically underestimate what will happen in the next 10. And he just finishes that off with, so don't get lulled into inaction. So don't get caught up in the hype, disappointed, and then think, well, actually, I won't do anything, because you'll get caught out. And if you're in any doubt, this is a little bit of audience participation now, because I feel I've been talking too much. If you ever owned a Nokia phone, could you put your hand up, please? Excellent. Well, when we edit this, what we'll say is, was I the best speaker of the day, okay? All right. Put your hands up now if you still own a Nokia phone. Usually there's one, and we sort of take the mick out of them, so I bet there is somebody in here, but so you're not saying who you are. Okay, so what that has demonstrated, I guess, is that is disruption in an industry, isn't it? So literally every single one of us, and we probably all had a 3310, because everybody had a 3310. And it was the phone to have, and we all had one. And then what happened was that happened. So 11 years ago, up on stage, launch of the Apple iPhone, bringing together all those capabilities, and suddenly everybody decided to have an Apple and then Samsung, and now everybody in this room will have either an Apple or a Samsung, pretty much, unless you're really sad and work for a provider that still dishes out Blackberries. And I know, don't laugh, there are still some that do, but I won't pick on those companies, but they do. Hey, Stuart. No. No, but so that's what's happened in 11 years. And so if we then go back to that point about China and its ambition that they said in 12 years we're going to be the global leader in AI, if you think what's happened just with our smartphones in the last 10, 11 years, that's the same time period. Now, we all use our smartphone every single day, probably for our social stuff, our business stuff, literally everything. I've got my phone in and out of my pocket all day, or just trying to find the address that I'm going to, whatever. Don't use a map anymore. So take that forward another 12 years, but with all the really clever stuff that's going on now, our world will look so different in 12 years' time. So critical questions that I pose to you, okay? So, do you really know what your purpose is, both from an individual basis, but also from a company basis? How relevant are you, not today, but how relevant will you be, and will your company be in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 7 years' time? And if you've got a little uneasy feeling in your stomach, you probably should do. And so now is the time to start thinking, so what am I going to do about it? Because all this stuff is happening, and it's happening every day. And these are some of the things maybe that we should be talking to our kids about as well. Have we got within our organisations, and particularly at a senior level, both the ability and the knowledge and the understanding, but also the passion to drive the change that's needed? And if your CEO hasn't, I'd suggest you're working in the wrong company. Are you challenging existing thinking? Is your company challenging existing thinking? Or are you trying to hang on to the business models that have served you well for the last decade? Because I promise you, the business models of the last decade will not be the winning business models in 10 years' time. Have you got the right organisational design and skills within your organisation? And if you haven't, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to recruit? Are you going to outsource? Partner? Big decision. So my leaving quote for you is this. You've got to be bold. Please, please, please be different, because I see the same stuff time and time and time and time again. So be different and always be on the consumer side. So if you're on the consumer side, you're actually coming at this from the right angle. If you want to know more, so you're going to get thrust of white paper as you exit the building. In fact, you're not allowed out unless you take one and read it, and you're going to be tested on it. And if you are on Twitter, please connect up, because I share lots of stuff, not just Altus stuff, but best practice from around the world. Very happy that I do that. I think that's important that we share. And if you like what I've said, I'm Simon Bussy. If you don't, I'll be somebody else. But thank you very much, and I will pass back to Andrew. Thank you.